Hello, my name is Victoria Seed, and I am coming to you from the Vesta Approach in Manchester. And I help women all over the world who are affected by a loved one's problem, drinking or drug use. And I can help you too. I do have a free, wonderful community called Not My Addiction, and that is over on Facebook. It is a private community. Please come in there and join us. It is a lovely group of women all going through a similar journey of living with a loved one's addiction, who want to know they're not on their own, who are supporting each other and have support from me in there as well. So please come over there and join us. So today, what we're going to be talking about is why do they take drugs or drink? So in my community, I asked what you need help, what people need help with this week. And this is a thing that came up. And so I thought, oh, do you know what? I will do a session on this. A friend of mine is called John Elford, and he has a wonderful, wonderful sober hotel called Somerton Lodge. Please, please, please check that out. And he also has getintorecovery.com, where he offers lots of training and support and loads of different stuff. And I saw him post something quite recently, which was about the different reasons why people use substances. So that is what I'm going to talk about today. I've recently delivered some training where we looked at this as well. So I'm just going to go through some of these ideas really, and you just have a think about why you think your loved one uses them. But this is kind of with a bit of a caveat around the fact that you can spend all of your time as an affected family member trying to get to the bottom of your loved one's substance use. What I would recommend is that you have a think about it because it is relevant, but professionals will do that deeper work with your loved ones. So our focus really as family members is not to therapize, is not to get underneath what's going on. It is to encourage and try and motivate a loved one to get the help they need in whatever route that they choose. So it could be 12 steps, it could be rehab, it could be, that they want to detox and then do something else. It could be smart recovery, it could be some private work, it could be a therapist. So whatever they do, is kind of their choice. But what we want to do is motivate them to get to that point, because the family members I help are all pretty much trying to do all of the work of all of the practitioners and all of those services I've just mentioned, and it just isn't possible. So we're going to do this. We're going to do it once, and I want you to have a think about why your loved ones are, and then I want you to focus on yourself. Okay. So first one, choice and enjoyment. So some people like to use substances because of choice, because of enjoyment. I'm just having a look what John says. So people that don't use substances, they might choose to avoid them. And people that do, they get a buzz out of getting drunk or high. So people use them because they like them, don't they? And, this can stem from an experimental phase during adolescence, for example. And then some people take it or leave it. So that's literally how it works. And some people genuinely take drugs because they like the feeling of what it gives to them. So that's the first one. Second one, is experimentation. It might be that, a person wants to try something because of being rebellious adolescents or whatever it is, but then that's it. But some people will take it on and some people won't. Okay. The third thing even is peer pressure. So peer pressure doesn't necessarily mean that peers are forcing you to take a substance. It might just mean that somebody feels like they want to do it because their peers are doing it, or because they want to do it to fit in, or whatever reason. So, when we think about our adolescents, it very much is the look of the draw, who our peers are, what music we get into, how we dress, what substances they might use, whether they drink or not, whether they're not really into that or more into health. So it just depends who we get involved with, doesn't it? So that peer pressure can be a really, really strong factor, particularly for young people. And, being around that culture of drinking, for example, or smoking weed or whatever it is. And then there's society. So John kind of emailed me about this week and said, obviously, like if somebody has more privilege, like wealth and comfort and ease and employment and a good education and all of that stuff, could they be less likely to have problems with substances than somebody who is living in poverty, experiencing a lot of adversity as a child or even as an adult, that perhaps it isn't living in a household where people are employed. It does bring less opportunity, which could lead to more substance use. However, as John Elford pointed out to me, it doesn't mean that people that have more privilege don't have problems with substances, because then you can go down the route of, well, there's more disposable income. There might be less, parental involvement after school because parents are too busy working, running businesses, whatever they're doing. And I've seen that in my work. So, in terms of society, there are those societal pressures, but none of this is like a linear scale where if you have this, you don't have it. And if you have this much, you do. So it's just to let you think about this today. Then there's genetics. So in terms of genetics, there is an argument, there is a theory that says around half of substance use is probably due to genetics and half is due to social factors. But then other people say it's nothing to do with genetics. So, for example, Dr. Gabor Mate says there's absolutely no evidence whatsoever to say that substance use is more likely if there's no particular gene like there is for maybe cancer, that says that somebody is more predisposed to having an addictive personality or an addiction problem. And actually, it's less to do with the genetics and more to do with the fact that they've been brought up in an environment where that's gone on. And that's the thing that's impacted their choices. So, yeah, just to have a think about that. And then obviously the next thing is environment, which I've already talked about. So, what has that environment been like? Have they grown up with a parent using substances? Because I've had a conversation with a client just this very week who's done some phenomenal work with me and now has said, do you know what? I was brought up with parental substance use. And I feel like some of the decisions I've made in my life have been because of that. So now she's going to go off and do some work around that with somebody else, because growing up with that has affected her choices in her partners. So, all the environmental stuff is how I work. It is behavioral type work. I believe that my clients can influence a change in their loved ones, or have the best chance to, if they change the environment in which they are living in or having their relationship in. So that's what I believe. So I believe in the environment being a really, really strong factor. Then we have trauma. So we've got a lot of stuff, a lot of knowledge around trauma. Have a look at Dr. Gabor Mate's stuff. He's getting a well-known, more of a well-known household name. YouTube, books. Go and check him out. He's been on all sorts of podcasts recently because he's released a new book. So have a look at that stuff, because trauma doesn't just mean you've had some significant, massively traumatic event. It's just the way we respond to certain things internally. So what might be a trauma for me might not be a trauma for my next door neighbour. So trauma is significant, and it's all about that, our nervous system and how we adapt, and how we self-regulate. So that's something that is strongly connected to addiction, drug use, alcohol use. And then of course there's mental health. So things like diagnoses, some of the depression, anxiety, some of the higher level diagnoses. I've got somebody with a a loved one who has schizoaffective disorder at the moment. So there's all of these factors involved in that as well. So then you go to like the chicken and the egg scenario. What came first? Was it the mental health? Was it the substance? But I'm telling you now, all of this stuff, the substance isn't going to help. If there's trauma, if there's mental health, if there's physical pain, the substance isn't going to help. So if your loved one is saying, it's because it's because of this, we've kind of got to help them step out of that using the substances for a crutch, which obviously we can't go into today. And then there's neurodiversity, ADD, ADHD, some of those other things that, again, there's a correlation between that and substance use, particularly with those that are undiagnosed or some people that are, so that could be a factor. And then emotional dysregulation as well. Just that inability to self-soothe, or even just broadening that, being unable to solve problems without a substance because of the way they make us feel. And then there's connection as well. So John says, having that individual purpose and spiritual connection, as opposed to being isolated, lonely, and having a lack of direction and purpose. So I strongly believe that sense of purpose and having that purpose is such a brilliant resilience factor, and everybody has somewhere that they can go and something that they can strive for, whether it's personally or professionally, to kind of give us a direction of focus. And I've spoken to people this week from Recovolution. Check them out. They've got a brilliant platform for recovery, and I'm gonna get involved with these guys, all in recovery themselves. So somebody said to me when I found recovery, it was just amazing. It was brilliant. It's the best thing ever. So how do we connect people who feel isolated in a journey with others? And this is what I do with my family members, and what I encourage them to do with their loved ones as well. Because when people find recovery, it's just a wonderful thing to have, and realize that you're not alone, and there's lots of pathways to get well. And then there's motivation as well. So, how motivated is that person to make a change? Are they internally motivated, or do they not have any internal motivation? Is it all extrinsic? And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way, because a lot of the time families are the people that motivate their loved one to change. The best approach is to work on the person being internally motivated to make that change, which is why I don't like things like interventions and things like that, because the person hasn't made the choice themselves. But through this type of work that I do, that is what we're kind of aiming for. And then there's dependence. Somebody might stick with a substance because of the physical and psychological dependency on it, that they don't feel right without it. So the opposite of that is just not having that. So certain substances might mean somebody doesn't have that, or all the other factors that we've talked about. And then there's dopamine as well, which is a neurotransmitter. It's our rewards in our brains that are telling us we like something and we want to do it again because it's giving us that reward. But then what happens is we struggle to focus on other things. So these, and I'm sorry I've gone over today, but these are all factors, and not all of the factors. John says it as well. There's could be other things. It's not just one thing over everything else. There could be one, there could be more. And these are the reasons why people use substances. So have a think about it. Have a think about it for your loved one. Don't forget to come and join me in the group Not My Addiction. Message me for help, and I will see you next week.